Okay, we're talking about last night's debate, and if you watched it, you might have been scratching your head. You might have seen the bullet points that you wanted. Andrew Acosta and Taber, consultants for both the Democrats and the Republicans, are here. Guys, thanks for joining us this morning. So overall, we talk about the bigger picture. I think a lot of people are sitting back this morning looking at memes online, trying to suss through what they saw last night. Did the substance come across, and do you think their candidate, whether it was Harris or Trump, came out a clear winner? Tab, let's start with you.
Well, if this was a debating contest and this was about who won the debate, I think you'd have to give the edge to Harris. But in a political campaign, you're looking at where does it help you with the people you need to help. And in that case, I don't think it helped or hurt either one of them a lot. It wasn't a deep six on either one, and it wasn't a clear victory for either one.
Andrew?
Well, we'll see. There were 30% of the voters didn't have a clear view of Kamala Harris before this. We'll see when the polls come out in a week or so what they think now when they see bits and pieces of the debate. I'm sure not everyone watches it cover to cover. But she scored some big points, especially with gender, the gender gap as it is on choice and some of these other issues that I think voters were pretty concerned when they hear what he has to say and then what she had to say, which, I think you look at the dial tests, people were very interested in what she had to say. And
they were paying attention to what she had to say.
It was much more compelling.
When we talk about staying on task, I think Trump performed like we kind of expected. But as far as Kamala Harris, it looks like she has really rehearsed for this and stayed on task and on message. And that message was, we don't want that. We want this going forward. Do you think she answered the questions and got that message across pretty well, Andrew?
I think she answered. I mean, look, there are people now saying that it was 3 against 1 and they're going to fact check her. But the point of the debate was for the two candidates to make their case. Donald Trump had an opportunity to go after her. He whiffed multiple times. Mm-hmm. She led him into, baited him into certain things. And it's the thing that Donald Trump said, everyone has a plan, like Mike Tyson said, until they get punched in the face. And he walked into several punches from her and walked into them again and again.
When we talk about, and I think we know what we're talking about here, if you want to get under Donald Trump's skin, talk about crowd sizes at the, you saw that, and you saw how he reacted, very defensive. You think it hurt him?
No, and I think you hit the key word earlier, rehearsed. And I think Kamala came off as very rehearsed. These were lines given to her. The substance was very weak. And I think she actually led herself into a couple of traps. Trying to talk about the economy when she's down 10, 15, 12 points, depending on which demographic group, is not going to help her. Talking about the border and trying to make people think that they've actually secured the border is not going to help her. So in areas where she thought she would be strong, abortion, she should have focused on that. But her trying to convince Americans that the economy is great under Biden-Harris was a colossal mistake on her part. She will not win the election if that's what the voters are thinking.
Do you think that message, though, reached that 30, 1/3 of the voters or less, like you were saying yesterday? Do you think that got across them? Because also, when the commentators talked to President Trump, trying to say, why did you deep six the border deal way back in January, December of last year, just to talk about it on the campaign trail? He never answered that question, never got around it. You don't think that hurt him? That helped Harris?
Well, I don't think either one of them were talking to the same audience. So they both had different audiences they were talking to. But if you look at the places where Kamala needs to make up ground, independent voters where she's trailing, 18 points lower than Biden was in 2020, with African-American voters where Trump has tripled his support, with Latino voters where he's up 17 points higher than he was in 2020. The issues that she tried to talk about and tried to focus on are issues where she's the weakest. And she hasn't offered anything of substance in terms of the economy, in terms of the border.
But do you think, and Andrew, I want to ask you this here, do you think she reached to the people that don't know her as well, offering them a different version of the quote-unquote craziness of Donald Trump and all the wild things he said last night, from abortion to cats and dogs being killed in Ohio, being eaten? She did paint a pretty good picture of that. Do you think that was good for voters? I'll ask you both that. What do you think?
Well, she looked presidential. I mean, when you have the former president talking about people eating cats, and the fact that we're even having this conversation and cat memes are taking over the internet right now, it just shows the chaos and the craziness. And when the split screens are him talking about cats and her looking at him like a crazy man, that's what some voters are saying, hey, we have enough of that. We had enough of that. Now it's time to bring this thing back. And she looked presidential. So I think she made the points that she needed to make. Now, some of the other issues about her plan and some of the details, yet to be determined how that all plays out.
Right. When we talk about messaging that small number you think that message got across, or do you think Donald Trump made better inroads?
I think there's actually about 14% of the voters that are really up in the air. And if you look at those undecided voters and where they are, it's not, I don't think this election is really about undecided voters. It's about who's going to turn out their base. And I don't think Trump hurt himself with his base. And I don't think that Kamala fully mobilized hers. I don't think she has reassured people who question whether or not she has the substance to be president. She hasn't offered enough substance to answer that question for them.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Boy, it was a wild night. There was a lot to talk about. I wish we could sit here for another half hour because I got lots of questions. Thank you both, Andrew Acosta and, of course, Tab Berg, for joining us this morning. It's, like I said, there's so much to talk about.